quite a contrast to what we saw at UBC or McGill. And our friend Sydney Fizzard in Calgary has been attending these Hamas events and the encampment, and he was there for hours as the police decided to move in. He joins us now from Calgary, and he's going to walk us through the events as they happen. Sid, first of all, thanks very much for being here, and thanks for going to sort of a risky environment. I mean, I don't think you were in grave peril, but you absolutely could have been hit either by a protester, or you could have, I suppose, come within range of some reaction by the police. In fact, I don't think the police were thrilled to see you. So thanks for being on the front line. That's the best of rebel journalism when we're right up there with the cameras. So thanks for doing that.
Well, absolutely, and thank you for having me on today. I should say it's atop of the potential risk there of these aggravators in the crowd. I also have a pretty serious knee injury, so I was actually limping around the entire time. But as you can see, it was well worth being there to see what went down. It was quite the enforcement that was taking place.
I understand, at least in the University of Alberta case, that 3/4 of the people in this university encampment were not even students. They were people who were opportunistically going to make some sort of a political statement. I think that lends credibility to these university administrators who are saying, get out of here. We're actually a place for learning. Tell me what it looked like in Calgary, and why don't you throw to some clips that you recorded that illustrate the case. Take us through it, because you were there for hours.
Well, and that's absolutely it. When it comes to, I'll address this first, when it comes to the organizers of these events, you'll notice that the police are negotiating or conversing, I should say, with activists within the community. They're not conversing with the student demonstrators who are on site, because realistically, there are far less of them than there are people who do not belong at that university. Whether it's activists, whether it's people within the Islamic community, as we saw, the signage there, that they have kind of represents this idea too of the indigenous relations on the matter, which is kind of ironic, but they go with that, and they go with North America as being Turtle Island, and they lace in all of these different claims together. You can see there's queers for Palestine as well, and there was even a full-blown Muslim prayer session that we saw on the field just beside the encampment. So there's some interesting stuff going on there, but again, I can't stress enough the fact that these are activists that are embedding themselves into these, quasi-student demonstrations. I mean, by nature of having a quote-unquote encampment on a university, you're going to have students that do have sympathy toward the demonstration. Obviously, there's many people at a university, but by far, these people are the agitators on site. And you can actually see in the morning, it was very calm. They had actually gotten there at 6:30 in the morning. They were issued trespass notices by the staff of the university in the morning as well. And then the Calgary police showed up. They were actually just hanging around in large numbers a few blocks away from the encampment. And they were waiting literally all day. At one point, maybe around 5, 6 o'clock, the Calgary police, they came in with a riot squad. But first they announced, hey guys, you have to leave. You've been issued the trespass notice. It's time to go. This isn't a negotiation. It's time for you to leave. You're trespassing on university school property. Many of these people not even being students, although some alleging to be staff members of the university embedded in the encampment. So they arrived. After they arrived, the riot squad, all of the members of the encampment, they actually kind of clustered together, and they had a conversation amongst themselves. They established what the damage might have been if they were to stay and get arrested, whether or not, if they were a student, they would perhaps have to deal with being expelled or trespassed from the property, which could complicate that. But they even warned, as they were deciding what to do as the riot police showed up, they warned, if you're not a student, or if you're on a student visa, you should separate yourself from this instance because there might be additional repercussions. So a real smorgasbord of activism that's going on at these places. It's very interesting, but a beautiful moment happened. I think it's a little slightly comical. Is that the demonstrators decided, okay, the riot police are here. They've given us the choice. We have to leave. Take your stuff and go, kind of thing, or do we want to stay? And they held a vote, and the vote was 23 people wanted to stay and 17 people wanted to leave. And as soon as they made that announcement, the Calgary police decided, okay, there's 20 feet of empty space here where the tents are still set up, and there's a police not a police line, sorry, a wall that they had constructed. So the police moved in, they took out the stuff that was in this empty space as the activists were all gathered together. And then they stopped. And they stopped for hours saying, you guys got to go. They re-entered the conversation with these activists who were there and said, look, you've only got one option, really. You've got to go. And then they waited hours. And then you can see again, this whole time throughout the day, it's these activists that are conversing with the university staff, that are conversing with the Calgary police. They're the intermediary here. And you can even see them later in the footage when a clash breaks out. They're behind the scenes as they push the students to the front to engage with police.
Isn't that interesting? Do we know who they were? Like, are they, for example, when I was in the United Kingdom on one of their huge marches, there are Muslim organizers, but there's also old stock white Brits with the Socialist Workers' Party or other communist groups. There's a bit of, you mentioned a hodgepodge of different activist groups. Would you say that the bosses here, you say they were putting the students at the front, who was doing that or organizing? Was that Antifa types, white leftists? Was it Muslim or Arab folks? Who were the masterminds?
Well, I've been taking a look at some of the footage and some of the live streams that people put out there to see who is involved. Now, I don't necessarily want to go too deep into who they are because I've just kind of started looking at this. But for some of the individuals there, you've got people that are, activist musicians that are promoting drag events. You've got people that are going to communist events. It's really interesting. You've got people that are associated with immigration as well. And many of these activists who aren't students have photos, selfies that they have with the current mayor, Jyoti Gondek, the former mayor, Naheed Nenshi, even federal people like the Prime Minister and Justin Trudeau, and then Jagmeet Singh as well. So it's interesting that these people are showing up on campus, disrupting, and probably, I can't make this assertion, but I would assume that the funding is probably coming from some of these older individuals who've been engaged in this activism for a while.
Isn't that interesting? Sometimes I have called Antifa the street teams of the left-wing political parties. They're sort of the thugs that get brutal. And if these folks are literally posing for selfies with Jyoti Gondek or Justin Trudeau, it explains a lot. Let me ask you a question, because I've attended a few of these different campuses, and I can get a few questions in, but when they Google who I am, or when they, if I ask too sharp a question, they immediately clam up and say, we're not talking to you, talk to our spokesman. And the spokesman don't like talking to me either. Now, maybe that's just maybe I'm hard to like. Did you have any interaction with them, or did they shun you as well? And I find this an interesting question, because protesters usually want their message heard. And even if they're just shouting at you, at least they're getting their message out. Did they interact with you, or did they sort of blacklist you too?
Well, I should say, and that, I mentioned this off the top, where I had a bit of an injury, and I knew that this could be a bit of a tense situation depending, and obviously many of these individuals may not like or may decide to target me as a Rebel News journalist. Right. So I did keep a distance for this one, because I wasn't in a position to necessarily run away rapidly if a gang of them collected on me. But given their rhetoric and given what I'd seen at the demonstration, they are not keen to talk to people. The media, I overheard them, mainstream media, I should say, saying, yeah, they're not going to give us, talk to us or give us an interview. And there's a lot of that. We see that at all these demonstrations. And in large part, it's because they don't actually know what they're talking about. Right. And if I could just say that the one song you'll hear them singing, "We shall not be moved, we shall not be moved," look into the history of where that comes from, and that tells you exactly what these people know about the protest they're advocating for.